Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Happy sunny Monday, right? It's finally the sun is here and we're trapped inside. Welcome to another really exciting Cockpit Conversations. I have the pleasure once again of being joined by the amazing Anat Shabi. Anat, nice to see you again.
Lovely to see you, and thank you for asking me for the second time. I feel honored.
No, it's always good to have you. I kind of feel like there's so much that we didn't talk about last time that we need to continue talking about. We need to dig a lot deeper into Buffy the Vampire Slayer today as well, I think.
Absolutely. Do you know, I've become I don't know, a member of a kind of fan club, I think. So people who reminisce about it and kind of bring up crazy stories, you know, the back stories that you don't get to hear. So yeah, that's how sad my life's been.
How funny. You're going to be writing fan fiction next. You'll be like continuing the story after the series finished.
Well, funny you should say that. They are bringing a modern version of it, apparently.
Oh, wow.
And Sarah Michelle Gellar refused to take any part of it. She says, you know, I'm too old. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite sensible. So we're here today to talk about Pack for Wellbeing, which we can see kind of scrolling along the bottom. Do you kind of want to kick us off on that and just tell everyone a bit more about what you're doing, the initiative, and then...
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So it's getting really exciting because this event, Packing for Wellbeing, is kicking off next week. And basically what we know is that wellbeing, as you know, Paul, it's a lifelong journey. And, you know, life has many ups and downs. And it's just really acknowledging that we need to have tools to help us. We need to have some strategies to help our well-being. And I think, you know, the demographics that has struggled the most in terms of mental health and well-being during this pandemic has been young adults. So we're talking about 19 to 25-year-olds. So this event is actually totally for this demographic. And what we're putting on is over 5 evenings, so starting from next Monday, 21st, and clashing with a little bit of football. Sorry, guys. We have 5 evenings from 6 to 7:30 p.m., but 5 amazing speakers. And each speaker is putting on a session just for people to try out a different strategy, a different tool. It's a practical session, so you get to benefit in the event, but then you walk away with a tool for life. And we're encouraging people to come along and also bring a friend because it's more fun. You can talk about it later. So that is what is happening, and it's going to be amazing. So we're looking forward to seeing you.
Brilliant. I think it's such a great idea, isn't it? I think when I think back to me when I was that age, me 19 to 21, I was never in the house. I was always out of the house. I was always doing stuff. And, you know, I think if that was taken away from me as a child, it would have been awful as a teenager, young adult, I guess. It would have been so difficult to just be trapped in the house.
It's such a good point, Paul, because that is exactly how in that when we are at that age, that is exactly how our mind grows and develops. It's by socializing with other people, and it's also by having new experiences. So going to university, picking up new hobbies, maybe as a graduate, starting a new job. Those are all new experiences outside of the school environment. And that's how our brain and mind grows and expands. And all that has kind of been flatlined, if you like. And you know, I think it's obviously impacted on young adults and everybody else, of course. So it's a really good point that you're making. And I wish these tools were available when I was growing up, I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the lineup of speakers you've got is incredible. I saw Mark Deeks the other day actually doing a session in another group that we were part of about kind of the power of music and just how short and sharp the time is. I mean, me and Mark have some really good crossovers. You know, Mark talks about playing music for 15 minutes a day and it not being necessarily about actually playing the music, but kind of just getting lost in it and allowing your brain to wander. And obviously I talk about that with my 7 minutes. Who else have you got? Who else is part of the sessions? Who can we look forward to
Yeah,
listening to?
you know what? Thanks, Paul, because I think your sessions as well, they kind of follow a similar line. It's all about doing whatever you're doing, but doing it mindfully. So it doesn't matter what you do. And I think our 5 sessions play to the fact that we're all so very different, and we will respond to different stimuli and different tools. So whatever works for you might not necessarily work for me. So following on that theme, our sessions are very diverse. So we've got Emma O'Leary. She's a visual artist. She's up in Edinburgh. And she's going to be teaching us how we can be grounded and mindful with simple drawings. And I have to say, I've been on one of her courses because the word simple caught my mind. I thought I can't draw, but if it's simple, you know, it might just work for me. And it's amazing what you can do. It really is. I mean, she believes that everyone can draw, and I'm kind of coming along to her line of thinking, having been on her course. So at her session, which is on the Thursday, she's going to be teaching us not just how to draw simply, but also how we can create our future. Because once you start drawing, your imagination kind of goes a riot, and you will come up with, you know, more creative things for you and for your future. So that's her session. Our first session is with Alex Webb and Charlie Welch, and they work with the Princess Trust, actually. So we're very lucky to have them. And they're going to be talking about our own unique skill sets. So what is it that we're good at that is our own unique inherent strength? Because I don't know about you, Paul, but so often when we can do something, or when something comes easily to us, we kind of dismiss it. We say, oh, well, surely everyone else can do this. And actually, no, it's not true. So it's just kind of reminding you, what is it that you're really good at, and how is it that it can help you in life? On Wednesday, we've got a great session with Lou Hinson, and that's called storytelling, because really, we tell ourselves all sorts of stories. We invent stories about ourselves, which then impact on our reality. And this is really about making us aware of, well, what is it that we're telling ourselves? Because half the time it isn't true.
Yeah.
And how is it that we can change it and change our reality? So again, it's a beautiful tool, and Lou is a great trainer and facilitator. So really lucky to have her. And the final session, of course, is going to have to be Lego Serious Play, and that's from I'm amazed that you still have that. Yeah. And really, so Paul, why don't you tell us about that? What the beauty of Lego is, because you've experienced that session. I'm going to put you on.
Oh, do it. I love it. I think, you know, it's a really interesting thing. The Lego Serious Play for me, and I think it's probably true of a lot of these sessions that you've got now, is sometimes we just forget to play, don't we? We forget that kind of creative thing. You know, I consider myself as not being creative, and it's quite funny because before I used to fly, I used to work as a designer in theatre. I used to be a lighting designer, but I would have never said I was creative. Like, everything I used to do was mathematical, and I was working out, calculating angles and all that kind of stuff. But of course, there is an inherent amount of creativity in that. You know, we all have that creative spark.
Definitely.
And just being able to sit down and disengage from the brain, like the critical brain, and allow yourself to just let your hands do the work. And I think, you know, that's true of the work that Mark does as well. That, you know, it's, why do we say, oh, I can't play an instrument? Or like you said, you know, I can't draw, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative, I can't do this. But once you disengage that and you just let the creative part of your brain, which all of us have, kind of take over. And I loved it. And just then being able to, you know, look at this model that we'd made in the end, and then kind of say, you know, what is it? What is this thing? I've just assembled random bricks. And then when you asked me, you know, what does the orange brick mean? Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to pull meaning out of the subconscious and kind of realize that there is a lot more to it than you think sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing. And you know what? I can't remember when we did that session, but it was ages ago, right?
Mm.
And it's absolutely amazing that all those months later, you can pick up the model and you can still tell me what on earth happened, what on earth is going on. It's a great it's really good for remembering things. So a lot of the time, if you've shared a conversation with someone, just by showing the model, that is really good for the long-term memory.
Yeah, definitely. I remember your model as well. Like, I really clearly remember your model because it was the day before your parents were going to have their first COVID vaccine. And at the time, it was a massive, significant event because, not that many people were having it and it was still a bit unknown. Whereas now it's, I've had mine now and it's, everything's kind of moving in that direction. So yeah, it really stands out to me, that session.
Yeah. And I think the other thing you were saying is about, our brains at the moment or throughout the pandemic have been so overwhelmed by so many things and so much anxiety and worry. And that element of disengagement, only happens because we are playing. Because once you kind of, it's like, it's not tricking your brain, but once the brain perceives that we are in play mode, all our guards, that critical voice that you were talking about, the guards that we put up, they're all kind of dismantled and we start playing. Our brain is playing. And when we start playing, our subconscious and creativity kick in, which is why, the breadth and variety of models that we produce is surprising even to us as we're building. We're like, oh my God.
Yeah, definitely. And that perception thing, I think, is so important, isn't it? I mean, I talk about it a lot, and it's something that I was taught kind of from day one flying about the power of perception to actually negatively and positively affect you. We talk about a lot in the cockpit that the vast majority of stress is perception based. Like, it's your perception of the task ahead. It's not the actual task. And to actually kind of, the more you kind of tackle perception, the more likely you are to overcome those barriers.
Yeah.
How much do you think that kind of applies to the younger generations? Do you think that's the same sort of thing?
I think, I think I think it's a really, really great point that you're making. And in a minute, I would like to talk about the stresses in the cockpit. I think that's always, it's like a source of endless fascination for me. But you know what? I think a lot of the time, our anxiety and stress is either because we built something up or because we have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of young adults, either going to university and suddenly not being able to socialize, having to learn online, or graduates who are coming into the job market and all of a sudden there aren't that many jobs, that anxiety is about worrying about something that we have no control over, totally outside of our control, but also not knowing. I think we are programmed to want to know stuff because it's a survival instinct, isn't it?
Yeah,
how
definitely.
am I going to operate in that new environment? And I don't know what it's going to be. So it's almost like you've got lack of data and your brain is going, oh my God, I can't go without this data. Yeah,
it's so true. And that's why I think well-being needs to be much more proactive than reactive, because you don't always know what you're reacting to, but if you're going into the unknown and you need to change your perception, then being more proactive, packing for well-being. See what I did there?
Oh, you're just too clever. Too clever there, Paul. I think you should be just managing my campaign.
You're all right. I can't manage my own life sometimes, never mind someone else's. But it's so true, isn't it? We need to just, because of that, I think once you understand that's where a lot of anxiety comes from, and that's where a lot of stresses come from, you can be better prepared for it. You can never deal with the unknown because it is unknown, but you can be better prepared in terms of being well rested, in terms of having strategies, nutrition. But I think as a society, we are far too bad at being reactive. Let it go wrong and then deal with it.
Yes, I agree with you. Do you know what? I mean, as an ex-pharmacist, that so resonates with me because, for me, it was all about preventative measures. As a pharmacist, I used to see so many things go wrong, and you later on in life, and you kind of go, we can do something about it now. We can manage our diet, our exercise, and equally we can manage our well-being. And the best time to do it is when you don't need to. I mean, don't need to as in the sense you're not in a crisis mode. There isn't, an anxious state of mind. So the best time to do it is now, when we're okay.
Yeah,
that's time to pick up the new tools, I think. So yeah, that really, really resonates with me, and I know that it has been your mantra as a pilot. And I would just love to. I mean, you mentioned the fact that you were a designer initially, then obviously you were a commercial airline pilot, and of all the professions to have kind of died a death, obviously the aviation industry has taken a huge hit. So I just wondered I mean, you obviously completely reinvented yourself and came up with a new business, and I just wondered if you tell us a little bit about the road to that, because obviously you've got a family to support, and it must have been a devastating blow.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the areas where I was quite lucky when I was made redundant, the training I've had as a pilot just kind of really sets you up for dealing with crisis. One of the things we talk about in the cockpit, and again, it's about this idea of being more proactive, is we have the same methods for every single thing we do. So, our decision-making model that we use in the cockpit is the same if you're trying to decide how much fuel to take on a flight, or if you're dealing with a life or death emergency. So from day one, you are trained to use the things that you will use in crisis. And that's always just been my philosophy with everything. And I think that's why the well-being thing has worked so well for me, because that's just how I work. Like I protect myself from day one, I'm always thinking ahead. So what could go wrong? Like, we talk about this with briefings. So when we do briefings in the cockpit, and whenever I talk to corporate clients about briefing, and they always say to you, "Oh, another brief." Here we go again. Like, we want to do another briefing. You sit in a boardroom for 90 minutes and not achieve anything. But we brief before every single flight, and our briefing is based on one question, and the one question is, what can go wrong today? If something's going to catch me out today, what is it going to be? Because as soon as you think about that, it can't catch you out, because you're prepared for it. The second that's in your mind, if I'm flying with somebody and I say to them, well, as soon as we take off today, there's a lot of birds at the end of the runway. We could hit one of those birds and we could have an engine fail. I know you love these stories, Anat.
I just thank my lucky stars. We are not flying at the moment.
Yeah. I know. I should do fear of flying courses, shouldn't I? Be like anti-fear of flying. I'll make more people scared. But by doing that, by posing that question, then the other pilot that I'm flying with will come back and say, well, how would we deal with that? Then what would we do? What would we do in that situation? How would we secure the aircraft? And we would talk through it, and we'd work through that whole scenario. So if we then take off and that happens, we are totally prepared for it. So that over the course of a week, you've pretty much practiced every emergency that could happen, because you've just gone through so many scenarios, so many options. And that's exactly what I wanted to take into this well-being thing, that if you are preparing in advance, if every day you are saying to yourself, okay, I've got a really busy week this week, so by Friday I could be really suffering. So what can I do today to make sure that I am not suffering on Friday, so that Friday doesn't take me by surprise? Because we can do that. We can look forward to our diaries. We can look forward to what's going on, and we can be much more proactive. So I saw these overlaps. I saw these massive overlaps between the cockpit and the world, basically. And just wanted to, I was so desperate to transfer it. It wasn't even like I saw money-making opportunities or anything like that. I was like, people need this. Like, people need this working. And, we talk about fit your own oxygen mask before helping other people. Everybody hears that. Everybody has heard that saying. Everybody knows they need to put themselves first. But when I tell them the story of when it happened to me, and I had 30 seconds to save the lives of 200 passengers, all of a sudden there's a mindset shift when people think, actually, that's quite a big deal. And you can't, as a pilot, you can't recover from that. But as a business owner, as a human, you might not recover from burnout. So why push yourself to those extremes when you know, like you said, today is the best day to make a change, and you can make a change, and it's not hard. It's really not hard. It shouldn't be hard, and it shouldn't be a chore.
Yeah, it should be fun. But let me ask you, Paul. So let me take you a step kind of further, because obviously this pandemic is nothing. It's not a scenario that you'd sit and say this could happen, right?
Yeah.
Unless you did sit there and say, well, what will happen if we're not able to fly anymore? So I'm just curious about what happened, or how did you get from, because there's a bit of a gap between you flying and then you starting up this amazing business that you've got at the minute, and the impact that you're having on so many people out there, and in terms of their mindset. So I'm just wondering what happened to you in that little gap. How did you go from I'm flying to I'm not flying? What do I do next? What happened then?
Yeah, so the actual redundancy happened in March 2020, and it's horrible. The whole process of the kind of redundancy that I went through. So obviously, you know, loads of people have been made redundant recently, but I was made redundant because the company collapsed. So we didn't get the 30 days notice or whatever it is with redundancy. We weren't given, you know, put under threat of redundancy. We woke up to an email that said the company no longer exists. Don't come to work.
Wow.
Which is hard. It's really hard.
And there were things across the board, whether you're a pilot or a cleaner, everybody got
the entire business got that email. Yeah.
Wow.
The worst thing with an airline is that in order to operate an airline, you have to have a license. You have to have a specialist license. So when you collapse, you obviously call in administrators, and administrators assume control of the business. But administrators don't have a license to operate an airline. So they can only assume control when there are no aircraft in the air. So they have to wait for every aircraft to be on the ground before they can enter administration. So with an airline, it's usually early hours of the morning, because that's the only time. So we knew, we had an idea as employees that something was happening. People, like, our head office is also our maintenance hangar and the training center. So there's a lot of people that are always around the head office. So they knew that something wasn't quite right, that something was going on. The newspapers were reporting on it. Newspapers were reporting that administrators were around the building, and that, you know, things were being prepared. At that point, it wasn't a signed deal. Like, they were still trying to save the airline up until the minute that it collapsed. And things like engineers were taking tools out of the hangars, and they were removing their stuff, because, you know, once the company take over, the administrators take over, they seize all the assets, so everything gets locked down. You can't get into the building. You know, if you've got cars in the car park, everything it's like, you know, you've got to apply to get stuff out. So we kind of had this idea the whole time. You know, there were things going on, like the HR department were potentially the ones who were saying, you know, something's happening here, you might want to get your stuff. And yeah, I think it was 2:00 in the morning we got the email from the chief executive, and it was brilliant. It was really well managed, bearing in mind what was going on. I got the email to the entire company and said, look, this is what's going on. So yeah, for me it was a really funny situation, because it was actually a week before we went into lockdown. So the world was still open. So I spent a week trying to find a job. Flying. The only flying jobs that were available were in the Middle East. There was a potential for Afghanistan, go out and fly in Afghanistan, which I didn't really fancy.
No, not with the family either.
No, and there was a point we were looking at Qatar as well as a potential option. There was a potential option in Emirates. It's funny, isn't it? You think, to what extent do I want this dream? Like, it's the dream job, but there's so much more to life than following that. So yeah, we then entered lockdown, and it became really obvious that the aviation industry wasn't going to recover. Like, it was, you know, everything was shutting down, redundancies were being made. So for a bit, I just kind of focused on being at home. Like, did the homeschooling, was like, I'm going to be at home, support my family. And that was lovely. Just kind of, you know, a lot of people talk about lockdown being a moment when they got closer to their family, and I definitely, that was how it was for us. And then I just tried to find jobs. I tried to find anything really that could keep me busy, keep me entertained, bring some money in. So I applied for a job as a delivery driver for one of the supermarkets. And I was told because I know, but I was told because I'd never driven a van before, I wasn't qualified, which is hilarious because I used to fly a 30-ton aeroplane.
I know. You can fly a plane, but you can't drive a van.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not allowed to do that. I applied for a store manager job for a mobile phone shop and was told I had no management experience, which again, spend my time managing the operations around an aircraft. And I applied for a job in a call center and was told I had no customer service experience. So I didn't get that either.
Amazing. I love that you've completely applied yourself to such diverse, roles as well. You weren't kind of saying, I will only do this.
Yeah.
You actually put yourself out there and said, okay, whatever's going, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, and I think that's important when people are suffering and the economy is suffering, and you just kind of want to do your bit, don't you? You feel a bit helpless when you're at home and in your garden, and, and the weather was so lovely last year. It's too easy. Like I can't just be sat around in the sun all day. Got to do something. Got to make this hard. And it was around that point that I started to think about my skills and what have I got to offer? Like, why am I not getting these jobs? What is it about these jobs where people are thinking I'm not qualified for them?
Yeah.
And then it led me into, well, actually there's a lot here that I almost need to teach them. Like I can give them so much and they don't quite realize it. So how do I bridge that gap of making them realize that I could be really valuable to their business? And then it grows, doesn't it? So it goes from there to thinking, well, that's one shop. Like, what if I could tell that whole industry that pilots are really useful? And I was seeing the aviation industry crumble and thousands of pilots losing their jobs. And I was like, if I can do something that makes people realize that all these people are valuable, that there's so many skills across this whole industry. And then ultimately healthcare was the right thing at the right time for me. Like frontline workers needed support. And I think I've said to you before, the vast majority of wellbeing strategies when we talk about wellbeing is to remove stressful factors from your life, remove yourself from stressful situations. Tell a doctor to do that when they're fighting a global pandemic. They're not going to listen, and they don't listen. We know how bad it is in the NHS. You can't even make them take their lunch. They will do a 14-hour day without eating. And then again, it kind of transformed into that idea in the cockpit. So if I'm in a full-blown emergency halfway over the Atlantic, I also can't step away from that. I can't be the one that distance myself. So I have to cope with it, and I have coped with it. And then, the link was there. Then I can teach that. I can give them that. I can gift them that and help them through the pandemic.
Amazing. So Paul, I mean, there's quite, just listening to you, obviously I'm picking up, there's a lot of, first of all, it's like that, I don't know, the ability to just apply yourself initially to any job, but then specifically just to keep going. I think you didn't lose sight of the fact that you wanted to do something, you wanted to help others, and you were kind of thinking, well, what is it that I can be doing? But obviously you then looked inwardly into the skill set that you have and is unique to airline pilots. And I just wonder, well, what do you think are the additional skills that kind of then helped you? Because there's one thing about thinking about it, it's another thing, obviously, about doing it, but not only doing it well so that people can access it, benefit from it, engage with it. And I just wonder, what do you think your additional skills are that have enabled you to do that?
For me, I've always been really passionate about education, about helping people. And it's funny, it was only recently I thought about this. So in my time when I worked in theatre, I used to work for a couple of drama schools around London where I would go in as a freelance designer, but also help them with lecturing. So I used to do a lot of lecturing about theatre and theatre design and mentoring students. And I loved it. I loved the reward of being able to share my experience. And it's a really interesting one, I think, in those industries, because it's not even about sharing knowledge. Like, it is sharing experience for me. And I think that's the thing that I feel most passionate about. Like, I don't think I would ever enjoy being a teacher. I wouldn't enjoy sitting and teaching maths from a textbook all day. Like, I enjoy talking about, this is what's helped me because I applied it in this way, and this is the outcome I got from it. So yeah, I used to do that in theatre. Then once I did my flight training, I worked for British Airways for a bit on the ground as a flight dispatcher, and I was a trainer there as well. So again, like it wasn't textbook style training. It was, you know, physically showing them this is the way an airplane. This is what we do. This is how we get an airplane ready to fly. And then again, when I was working for the airlines that I was working for, I used to help out quite regularly with training. Like, you know, I would get calls from the training department asking me to go in and do a day in the simulator because they needed extra people, or, you know, helping somebody who's preparing for a licensing exam, and I always really enjoyed that. So yeah, I made that connection quite recently, and I think ultimately that was what it was with the business. You know, it was. Yeah. I just wanted to share my experience. I knew that my experience could help people, and I was just almost desperate to share it, and still
still passionate about that. So it's really interesting. It's two things, isn't it? It's one is about obviously sharing your own experience, but underneath that is the way that you're sharing it. So it's not. It is that pragmatic, practical thing of sharing, and that you do when you train. And I just wonder, well, what is it? What is it about that particular style of sharing that resonates with you?
Do you know, I don't know. I don't know. I think I like the outcome. I like the outcome that people get.
Which is?
I like seeing people improve themselves.
Right. Like, why is that then?
Well, it makes them better, doesn't it? It gives them a better life. It gives them a better understanding of something. Like I don't think anything that I teach is complicated. Yeah. You know, I could teach you my methods and you could teach somebody else them. Mm-hmm. And I quite like that there's almost a social chain, isn't there? Of if I can help somebody else improve, they can help somebody else improve. And then ultimately we can help everybody improve.
Yeah. So is it that you're helping all those people? Is that what it is?
Yeah. And I do have a bit of a thing against almost social injustice as well. The side of, I think there's a lot of things when it comes to well-being that people get a bit bogged down with, and they get a bit stressed about well-being. And I almost want to debunk some of it. You know, like there are so many things out there that are really good. So, for example, I had an email the other day from a company who told me that they had a one pill solution to improve all well-being. And yeah. And I was so, you know, I get emails all the time that I just don't reply to, but this one I was so compelled to reply to them because I was like, this isn't right. Like there is a burning inside of me that's like, I need to stand up against this. I need to stop this from happening. Like, this isn't right. You can't. There isn't a one. You know, it's one of the first things you said. There isn't a one solution that works for everybody. But so many people talk about that, and so many people look for that one solution. I think well-being has become far too difficult. It's become cumbersome. People think it's a chore. People don't want to do it for that reason. You know, when you say to people, you know, what do you do for your self-care routine? And they say, well, I don't have time. Like, that's a terrible excuse. But that's what society wants us to think.
Yeah, because you know what, we're all in for easy fixes. Just give me a one shot or one pill to cure everything. But I think the other thing, Paul, I think people are looking after their well-being, but they're not necessarily aware that they are. Do you know what I mean? We've got a lot of people exercising, a lot of people reading, a lot of people doing mindful stuff, but maybe they're not kind of aware that this is well-being. I don't know whether we've tagged it.
Yeah, possibly. And there's quite a bit of a joke within the circle that I'm in, that I talk a lot about. I actually hate the word well-being because it's just being used in the wrong way, isn't it? Like, being
what would you call it then? What would you call it?
That's a terrible question. I can't answer that.
It's a great question. We need to come up with something that maybe you know, you even talked about it in your cockpit but gave it a different name. So
yeah, I mean, I talk to my clients about being the pilot in command of your life. Like, that's you are the pilot in command. Like, nobody's going to look after you. You need to look after yourself. And then you can look after everyone else. You know, it goes back to that thing of the oxygen mask. I don't think there is another word for well-being that works in the way that well-being does. But but I think it's being misused. You know, I'm there's a school that I do some work with, and I was talking to them about their wellbeing solutions, and they said, oh yeah, you know, we've just put in this great system where once a term we do a raffle and one member of staff gets a £10 Tesco's voucher. I thought, that's okay. Like,
what's that going to do with anything?
yeah, exactly. Cure the looming mental health crisis that we're going to have. Like, this is what I mean. Like, people think that something like that is well-being, you know, like,
it's like we've ticked the box.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like that whole diversity thing on like questionnaires, isn't it? When you tick the diversity questions at the end so that they know they're representing a wide group of people. And I think well-being is a bit like that still at the moment, that it is a tick box. Like, what can we do to tick this box so that if somebody comes and says, what are you doing? That's the reply we can give.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's in a misguided way either, though. Like, they would, well, you know, when I asked that question, they were genuinely excited that that's their solution, that they've got this amazing thing. They've allocated budget to it. You know, they allocate £60 a year to wellbeing. That's, you know, that's amazing. That's, you know, a quarter of their English budget or whatever it is. And you think it doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. And you know, I think with long COVID as well becoming more prominent, I do worry that you know, we're not as engaged as we could be. But I just give thanks for people like you who are slowly but surely, you know, spreading the news and spreading the tools.
Fight the good fight.
I've
got a question for you, Anat, that came up the other day that I'm quite interested to see what your take is on this. So, as you know, I do a lot of work in the NHS, and I know you have a history with the NHS as well. I was having a conversation with a very prominent chief exec for one of the NHS trusts, and we were talking about hero mentality. So the mentality of doctors and nurses, frontline staff, rightly so, have been called heroes throughout the pandemic. Because they are out there fighting the good fight. But it's now being reported, and there was an article released last week by a parliamentary body that's saying that this is now becoming a damaging mentality, the hero mentality, and these people are actually pushing themselves to burnout because they're being branded as heroes. What do you think we can do to kind of overcome that? Because they are heroes in our eyes.
Well, do you know what? It's a really, first of all, there's a number of interesting things I think going on here. It's the press and the government that have branded them as heroes initially. And I do wonder whether the people on the ground see themselves as heroes, because they are just doing their job day in, day out. And they are, you know, they continue to do so despite horrendous and horrific kind of conditions. I think we might call them heroes, but that hasn't been translated into the benefits. They have not been rewarded as heroes would be. So to me, there's a big dissonance between being branded as heroes, but actually being rewarded for it. So we might call them heroes, but in no way have we treated them as heroes. So I do question whether somebody working in the NHS feels like a hero. And I think the other point then to make, which is relating to your question then, how do we deal with it? I think that the people who need to deal with it is us, not them, because I really do question whether they feel like heroes. I think we should be treating them as people who have, you know, gone above and beyond the call of duty and are not being rewarded for it, or are not having the measures put in place to look after their well-being. I have no idea how they coped during that last wave. We talked about, you know, just the quantity of deaths and the overburdening, you know, in terms of cases coming in. I have no idea how they coped. But is it talked about? Is it reported? Are there any interviews? Are there, you know, there aren't. And it's to me that is you know, that is the sad thing about this hero mentality, because a hero in our mind is somebody like Major Tom. Look at how he's been applauded and lauded. I mean, and you know, compare him with the other heroes. Yeah, so it's a really good question, but I actually see the problem is with us and not with them, because I don't believe that they are thinking of themselves as heroes, and I don't think that they are facing this damage. And I'd be really interested to hear what your chief exec had to say.
Yeah, well, he thinks there is a potential hero mentality, but we didn't talk in too much detail about where he thinks it's coming from. That's a really interesting point, actually, about it being press related and from the government, and it not really translating. The comparison I always make is with Captain Sully, who landed the aircraft on the Hudson River.
Yes.
And when he was interviewed afterwards and called a hero, he said, well, I was just doing my job.
Yeah,
I was just doing my job.
Well, and actually for him, I mean, he wasn't a hero initially. He was being grilled and questioned and had really been put through the mangle. And it was only the obviously the survivors and only when they realized that all the simulations took place endless times before they could actually do what he did.
Yeah, because they hadn't factored in reaction time, had they, with it? So because they knew what was going to happen when they tried to recreate it.
Exactly. Yes.
You can never simulate something that's happened like that. Yeah. You just have to trust that the right decisions were made. But no, I was quite interested to see what you thought about that, because I think from my side with this as well, I think there's a potential bigger problem, and I think and this is why I wanted to bring it up, because it goes beyond the NHS, and I think it's something that's also affecting the younger people, is that I think we are mistaking the signs of burnout for resilience. That people have, we're thinking that people are actually being really resilient and that they're being really robust and that they've dealt with the pandemic really well, and actually they're suffering now with adrenal fatigue and it's going towards burnout. That what we've had is this surge of constant adrenaline because of the constant exposure to social media and the constant exposure to the news and all these problems that are going on around us. And everyone just thought that they were being quite resilient, and actually it was potentially something far more worrying. So the warning signs have been there, but it's been potentially misjudged the whole time. I think that's potentially true with the younger generations as well.
And you know what? I think that's a great point you're making, and I think that one of the things to obviously to try and get abreast of this is to have the awareness. So what is it? What does it look like? Because as you say, for some people it might be masquerading as resistance. So they've done resilience. Sorry, they've got through, and they're just so resilient. But really, half the time you don't know what's going on for that person, and maybe they haven't stopped to kind of acknowledge it or even ask for help. So I think that the first point is really being aware of it and raising it as you are doing now.
Yeah, and I think again, the thing that you're doing next week is where this is perfect, because the only way to really get away from that is to just make well-being part of your routine, to just give yourself rest by every day for your body to be able to recover. And it doesn't have to be much, does it? Like, I talk a lot about doing things you love.
Yeah.
And that's where, I think all of your sessions are going to fit so well into that. If you're a creative person, you love being creative, you love doing things with your hands, then go do Lego Serious Play. If you love listening to music, then, Mark talks about listening to music for 15 minutes and doing nothing else. Like, let yourself switch off, let your body recover. Doesn't have to be a chore, right? It's just action steps.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think all these sessions are actually fun as well. So even if it might not be you, come and try it out. All it is like an hour. If you're curious about how it could fit in with your lifestyle, this is a great opportunity to find out. These trainers are actually, they've been all over the world. They're kind of really well versed with a diverse audience. They've got loads of experience, and they make the sessions so much fun. So it is really about bringing a friend along and just trying something new together, a new shared experience. I tell you what, it beats any kind of Zoom quiz or anything else that's going on. This is really, quite something. So
yeah, definitely.
Do encourage our listeners to either promote this event or just turn up if you're in the right age group. It really is going to be great.
And the most important question, Anat, and this is the one that's going to blow everyone's mind, this amazing event that's happening next week, how much does it cost?
Oh, yeah, you are really, thanks, Paul. You're really going to have to dig deep for this, because it is, to you, dear listeners, it is absolutely free. And what we're doing, actually, we are also raising money for Young Minds. So it's a charity fighting for the mental health well-being of young adults. So each of the 5 speakers is actually donating their fee to this charity. So by coming along, we've already got £2,000 in the bank, which is amazing. So come along and just show your face and make it all worthwhile for the speakers as well.
Amazing. Well, the link is somewhere around this video, depending where you're watching it. Probably below in the comments, I think. We did put it in there earlier on. And if you want to connect with Anat, obviously Anat's talking about this a lot at the moment, and I will be promoting it as well. So
thank you so
connect with me or Anat, and we'll get it out there for you.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking to you, Paul. I could talk to you for hours, especially about healthcare and mental health. And one day, Paul, we're going to meet.
I know. Do you know, I've just scheduled my first few meetings with people that I've been talking to for the last year on Zoom.
Amazing, isn't
really
it?
Weird. I'm a bit nervous about seeing the back of people. There's so many people I haven't seen the back of. There we go. So it won't be a surprise now. I could have been walking behind these people.
I'm actually 3-dimensional. You might think I'm a cardboard cutout, but no.
Yeah, see people's legs and backs. It's going to be the height thing that's going to surprise people, isn't it? When we realise how tall people are.
Yes, I'm not very tall, so there you go. I'm giving it away now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'll come with heels.
Oh, good. That's good.
If I can still walk in them, that is.
I know. This is it. Can't remember what it's like to wear normal clothes anymore.
Especially on your bottom half.
Yeah. The Zoom half.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Anat. As always, it's been a real pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you.
Good luck next week. I'm really excited for it. I think it's going to be.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate your support. Thank you.
My pleasure. Have a good day. See you soon.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Bye.